The morning sun peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across Tom Wilson's cornfields. At 52, Tom had spent his entire life on this land just as his father and grandfather had before him. The small farm in rural Nebraska wasn't much compared to the massive operations that had sprung up around the county, but it was his, paid for with decades of early mornings, calloused hands, and a stubborn refusal to give up during the tough years. Tom sipped his coffee on the back porch, surveying his property with a critical eye. The last week had brought the heaviest rains he'd seen in years. Good for the crops, sure, but the water had carved new paths through his backfield, washing away topsoil he couldn't afford to lose. With a sigh, he set down his mug and headed out to assess the damage. His old border collie, Rex, trotted alongside him as he walked the perimeter of his property. The morning dew soaked through his worn work boots as he made his way to the far corner of the backfield, where the rain had hit hardest. The damage wasn't as bad as he'd feared, but he'd need to bring the tractor around to move some dirt and prevent further erosion if they got more rain. As Tom turned to head back to the house, something caught his eye, something that didn't belong. About 50 yards away, where the ground sloped down toward the creek, he spotted what looked like a large, dark object partially exposed in the freshly eroded soil. "What do you suppose that is, Rex?" Tom muttered, changing direction to investigate. At first, he thought it might be an old piece of farm equipment, perhaps something his father had buried years ago. The corner of it jutted out from the muddy earth, dark and solid. But as Tom got closer, he realized this was no rusty tractor part. The surface had an unusual metallic sheen that didn't look like anything he'd ever pulled out of the ground before. Tom knelt down, ignoring the mud soaking through his jeans, and brushed away some of the wet soil with his hand. The object was cool to the touch and surprisingly smooth. It didn't budge when he pushed against it, suggesting it was much larger than the exposed portion. Curiosity getting the better of him, Tom headed back to the barn and returned with a shovel. He began carefully digging around the object, trying to get a better sense of what he was dealing with. After 20 minutes of steady digging, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning chill, he stepped back in surprise. He had exposed about 3 feet of what appeared to be a curved, metallic surface, but he still couldn't see the edges of the thing. "This ain't no farm equipment," he muttered to himself, leaning on his shovel. The sun climbed higher as Tom continued to dig, widening the hole around the mysterious object. By midday, he had uncovered enough to realize he was dealing with something truly massive, possibly the size of a small car, though most of it remained buried. The surface had an unusual patina, neither the dull gray of steel nor the reddish-brown of iron, but something altogether different with an almost iridescent quality when the sunlight hit it at certain angles. Tom's neighbor Bill Johnson had stopped by to borrow a tool when he noticed Tom's truck parked in the far field. "What in the world are you doing out here, Tom?" Bill called as he approached, his heavy boots squishing in the mud. Tom straightened up, his back protesting after hours of digging. "Found something strange in the field. Rain must have washed away enough dirt to expose it." Bill peered into the hole Tom had excavated and let out a low whistle. "What is that thing?" "Your guess is as good as mine," Tom replied, wiping sweat from his brow with a muddy forearm. "Too big to dig out myself, that's for sure." Bill reached down and ran his fingers along the smooth surface. "Never seen anything like it." "You think it might be valuable?" Tom shrugged. "No idea, but I'm going to find out." That evening, after a hot shower to wash away the day's grime, Tom sat at his kitchen table with his ancient laptop open in front of him. His internet connection was spotty at best, but he managed to search for information about large metal objects found underground. Most results pointed to old war debris, buried fuel tanks, or meteorites. None of the images he found looked quite like what was sitting in his back field. On a whim, Tom sent an email to the geology department at the state university about 80 miles away. He didn't expect much, professors were busy people, after all, but he included a couple of photos he'd taken with his phone and a brief description of where and how he'd found it. To his surprise, he received a response early the next morning from Dr. Linda Hayes, a professor of geology specializing in meteorites and impact structures. She seemed intrigued by his photos and asked if she could come out to the farm to examine the object in person. Tom agreed, providing directions to his property. 2 days later, a university van pulled into Tom's gravel driveway. Dr. Hayes turned out to be a practical woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that Tom appreciated. She was accompanied by 2 graduate students who began unloading equipment from the van. "Thank you for reaching out, Mr. Wilson," Dr. Hayes said, shaking Tom's hand firmly. "From your photos, this could be something quite significant." "Just Tom is fine," he replied. "It's not every day I find something worth a scientist's time in my backfield." He led them to the excavation site, where he'd continued to expose more of the object over the past couple of days. Now a roughly oval shape about 8 feet long was visible, though it clearly extended deeper and wider into the surrounding earth. Dr. Hayes approached it slowly, her expression shifting from professional interest to barely contained excitement. She pulled out a small device and held it near the object. "This is a handheld XRF analyzer," she explained, noticing Tom's curious look. "It can tell us the elemental composition of materials without damaging them." After taking several readings around the exposed portion, Dr. Hayes turned to Tom with wide eyes. "Mr. Wilson, Tom, this is extraordinary. The preliminary readings suggest this object has a high nickel-iron content, consistent with meteoritic material, but there are other elements present that are unusual, to say the least." One of the students, a young man who had been taking photos and measurements, joined them. "Dr. Hayes, I've done a rough calculation based on the exposed curvature. If this is roughly spherical, we're looking at something at least 12 feet in diameter." The professor nodded, her mind clearly racing. "If this is what I think it is, Tom, you may have discovered one of the largest intact iron meteorites ever found in North America." Tom blinked, trying to process this information. "A meteorite? You mean from space?" "Precisely," Dr. Hayes said. "Most meteorites break up significantly when they enter the atmosphere. To find one this size relatively intact, it's almost unheard of." The second student, who had been taking soil samples around the perimeter, called over. "Dr. Hayes, you might want to see this. The soil composition changes dramatically about 2 feet out from the object. There's evidence of extreme heat alteration." "That would be consistent with an impact event," Dr. Hayes murmured, more to herself than to Tom. She turned back to him. "Mr. Wilson, would you be open to a more extensive excavation? With proper equipment, of course, and full consideration for your property." Tom looked at the strange object emerging from his field, a visitor from the stars that had been quietly waiting beneath his feet all these years. Something stirred in him, a sense of wonder he hadn't felt since he was a boy. "I reckon that would be all right," he said slowly, "but I have some conditions." By evening, word had somehow leaked out about the discovery. Tom's usually silent phone rang 3 times, first the local newspaper, then a TV station from the city, and finally his sister in Omaha, who had seen something about it on social media. Tom sat on his porch as the sun set, watching Rex chase fireflies in the yard. Tomorrow, his quiet farm would become a hive of activity. University people, media, probably curious neighbors too. His normal routine would be disrupted, maybe for weeks. Yet as he gazed toward the back field where the strange visitor from space lay waiting, Tom felt oddly at peace. Whatever happened next, his life had suddenly become a lot more interesting. And after 52 years of the same seasonal cycles, the same daily chores, the same struggle to keep the farm afloat year after year, a little interesting might not be such a bad thing. Little did Tom know that what they would discover about this mysterious object in the coming days would change not just his life, but potentially our understanding of the universe itself. Tom woke before his alarm the next morning. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of his old farmhouse settling, before remembering that today wouldn't be like any other day. There was a visitor from space in his back field, and people were coming to dig it up. By the time he'd finished his morning chores, vehicles were already turning onto his gravel driveway. Dr. Hayes arrived first with a larger team and more equipment than yesterday. Close behind was a news van from the local station, and then another from the city. Tom had spent most of his life avoiding attention, and now it was all headed straight for him. "Mr. Wilson," Dr. Hayes greeted him, extending her hand. "Thank you again for allowing us to continue our work. I hope you don't mind, but I've brought a few more colleagues who specialize in meteorite recovery." Tom nodded, looking past her at the small crowd forming near his barn. "Seems the word got out pretty quick." "That's actually something we should discuss," she said, lowering her voice. Finds like this can attract a lot of attention. Some welcome, some not. There are private collectors who might approach you with offers. I hadn't thought about that, Tom admitted. He hadn't thought about any of this, really. For now, we'd like to set up a proper excavation site, Dr. Hayes continued. With your permission, of course. Within hours, Tom's quiet backfield had been transformed. Yellow tape marked off a large perimeter around the object. Graduate students took soil samples while others assembled what looked like a portable tent over the site. A geophysicist had brought ground-penetrating radar equipment to determine just how large the meteorite actually was, without having to dig up the entire field. Tom watched it all from a distance, feeling strangely detached, like he was watching a movie about someone else's farm. His neighbor Bill had stopped by again, along with half a dozen other locals who'd heard the news. You're gonna be famous, Tom, Bill said, slapping him on the back. They're saying it could be worth a fortune. Tom frowned. He hadn't even considered the money angle. The thought of people fighting over a piece of rock in his field made him uncomfortable. A young reporter from the local station approached, cameraman in tow. Mr. Wilson? I'm Diane from Channel 8 News. Would you mind telling our viewers how you discovered the meteorite? Before he could answer, a black SUV pulled into his driveway. A man in a suit stepped out, looking decidedly out of place among the muddy boots and casual clothes of everyone else. He scanned the scene, spotted Tom, and walked directly toward him. Mr. Wilson? Frank Thompson, Midwest Museum of Natural History, he said, offering a business card. I'd like to talk to you about acquiring your find for our institution. Tom took the card reflexively. It's a little early for that, don't you think? They haven't even dug it out yet. The man smiled. It's never too early to start the conversation. We're prepared to make a very generous offer. Before Thompson could continue, Dr. Hayes appeared at Tom's side. Mr. Wilson is allowing us to conduct a scientific assessment before any decisions are made, she said firmly. Perhaps you could come back another time. Thompson's smile tightened, but he nodded. Of course. But Mr. Wilson, do keep in mind that private ownership might be your most advantageous option. I'll be in touch. He handed Tom another card and walked back to his SUV. The reporter, who had been filming the entire exchange, stepped forward again. Mr. Wilson, it seems your discovery is already generating quite a bit of interest. Do you have any plans for the meteorite once it's excavated? Tom looked at the camera, then at the business card in his hand, and finally at the cluster of scientists working in his field. I just want to know what it is, he said honestly. The rest can wait. By mid-afternoon, the initial findings from the ground-penetrating radar had everyone buzzing. Dr. Hayes approached Tom, who was taking a break on his porch. It's even more significant than we thought, she said, her voice tinged with excitement. The meteorite appears to be roughly spherical and approximately 15 feet in diameter. That would make it one of the largest intact iron meteorites ever found. Tom whistled. That's big. That's massive, Dr. Hayes corrected. Most meteorites this size break apart in the atmosphere or upon impact. The fact that this one remained largely intact is extraordinary. How long do you think it's been there? Tom asked. Dr. Hayes considered the question. Without proper dating, it's hard to say exactly. Based on the soil composition and the depth at which it's buried, I'd estimate it impacted hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, long before this land was settled by your ancestors. The thought was humbling. This thing had been lying beneath his family's feet for generations. There's something else, Dr. Hayes added, hesitation in her voice. The preliminary analysis shows some unusual properties. The composition isn't quite what we'd expect from a typical iron meteorite. What does that mean? Tom asked. I'm not entirely sure yet, she admitted. We'll need to extract core samples for more detailed analysis. But if you're agreeable, I'd like to bring in some colleagues from the astrogeology department. This could be something truly unique. As the day progressed, more people arrived. Another news crew, this time from a national network, a representative from the state university's administration, 3 more private collectors or museum representatives. By evening, there were 24 vehicles parked along Tom's driveway and the road beyond. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Someone had posted his number online, and now everyone from journalists to amateur astronomers to conspiracy theorists wanted to talk to him. After the 5th call claiming the meteorite contained alien technology, Tom turned his phone off completely. The next morning brought even more chaos. A line of cars stretched down the country road leading to his farm. People with cameras climbed his fence until the sheriff arrived to establish some order. 2 large trucks delivered heavy excavation equipment that Dr. Hayes had somehow expedited. Tom retreated to his barn, seeking a moment of quiet among the familiar smells of hay and motor oil. Rex followed him, equally disturbed by the invasion of strangers. "What do you think, boy?" Tom murmured, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Did we stir up more trouble than it's worth?" "There you are," came a voice from the barn door. It was Dr. Hayes. "I've been looking for you. The excavation team is ready to begin the major dig, but we wanted your approval first." Tom sighed. "Seems like things are moving awfully fast." She nodded sympathetically. "I understand this is overwhelming. If you want us to slow down or even pause for a day, we can." Tom considered it for a moment. Part of him wanted to tell everyone to go home and leave him in peace. But another part, the part that had always wondered what lay beyond his fields, beyond the horizon, was just as curious as the scientists. "No," he finally said. "Let's keep going. I want to see what's really down there." The excavation began in earnest. Heavy machinery carefully removed the top layers of soil around the meteorite, while scientists monitored every step. By noon, they had exposed nearly a third of the massive object. Its surface gleamed dully in the sunlight, the strange patterns and textures unlike anything found on Earth. A crowd had gathered behind the police tape, watching in fascination. News helicopters circled overhead. Someone had set up a food truck at the end of Tom's driveway, selling meteorite burgers and cosmic coffee. Late in the afternoon, as the excavation reached a critical phase, one of the graduate students working near the bottom of the dig site called out excitedly. Dr. Hayes hurried over, followed by several colleagues. They huddled together, examining something on the meteorite's surface. After several minutes of animated discussion, Dr. Hayes approached Tom, who had been watching from the edge of the site. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice carefully controlled but her eyes shining with barely contained excitement. "We found something that changes everything we thought we knew about this object. In fact, it might change what we know about meteorites entirely." "What is it?" Tom asked, intrigued by her obvious excitement. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath. "There appears to be a pattern on the lower quadrant of the meteorite. Not a natural pattern formed by crystallization or impact, but something that looks designed." Tom stared at her. "Designed? You mean like someone made it?" "I'm not jumping to any conclusions," she said quickly. "It could be an unusual natural formation that just appears synthetic, but we need to investigate further." She hesitated, then added, "Would you like to see it?" Tom nodded, his heart suddenly beating faster. He followed Dr. Hayes to the excavation site, where a section of the meteorite had been carefully cleaned of soil. There, etched into the metallic surface, was what looked unmistakably like a series of geometric shapes, circles, lines, and angles arranged in a pattern too precise to be random. "What does it mean?" Tom whispered, unable to take his eyes off the markings. Dr. Hayes shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever this is, Mr. Wilson, it's not just a meteorite. And whatever happens next, nothing is going to be quite the same again." As the sun began to set over Tom's farm, casting long shadows across the excavation site, he realized that his life had irrevocably changed. The quiet existence he had known for 52 years had vanished the moment he spotted that strange object in his field. Now he stood at the edge of a discovery that might reach far beyond his small corner of Nebraska, perhaps beyond Earth itself. News of the strange markings spread like wildfire. By morning, Tom's farm had become the center of a media storm. National news vans lined the country road, and reporters from science magazines and major newspapers joined the crowd. The sheriff had to call in deputies from neighboring counties to manage the growing number of onlookers. Tom sat at his kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to ignore the helicopters circling overhead. Rex lay at his feet, unsettled by all the commotion. The phone rang again, the 10th call in the past hour, but Tom let it go to voicemail. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Hayes, looking like she hadn't slept. "May I come in?" she asked. Tom nodded, stepping aside. "Coffee?" "Please," she said, following him to the kitchen. As Tom poured her a cup, she spread several photographs on the table. They showed different angles of the geometric patterns on the meteorite. "We've been analyzing these markings all night," Dr. Hayes explained, accepting the coffee gratefully. "They're definitely not natural formations. The precision, the symmetry, they were deliberately created. Tom sat down heavily. So what are you saying? That this thing was made by someone? That's one possibility, she admitted. But there are others. The patterns could have been carved after the meteorite landed, perhaps by indigenous people who discovered it centuries ago. Or they could be the result of some unknown natural process we've never observed before. She paused. Or yes, they could indicate non-terrestrial origin. You mean aliens? Tom said bluntly. Dr. Hayes winced slightly at the term. I'm a scientist, Mr. Wilson. I deal in evidence, not speculation. Right now, all we know is that there are unusual markings on what otherwise appears to be a meteorite. We need more data before drawing conclusions. Tom rubbed his forehead. Well, while you're gathering data, my farm has turned into a circus. I've got people camping in my east field, reporters shouting questions every time I step outside, and someone trying to sell t-shirts with my face on them. I'm truly sorry about that, Dr. Hayes said sincerely. If you want us to stop? No, Tom interrupted. I don't want to stop. I want to know what this thing is as much as anyone. But I need to regain some control here. By midday, Tom had taken action. With help from his neighbors and the local authorities, he established clear boundaries. The curious public would be allowed to view the excavation from a designated area far from his house. Media access would be limited to scheduled briefings, and absolutely no one was permitted to approach the meteorite without proper authorization. The university provided security personnel to enforce these rules, and things quickly became more orderly. Dr. Hayes seemed relieved by the structure, allowing her team to work without constant interruptions. The excavation continued, revealing more of the mysterious object. Nearly 3/4 of it was now exposed, rising from the earth like some strange monument. The geometric patterns extended across much of its surface, forming what appeared to be interconnected sections. While the scientists worked, Tom found himself besieged by offers and propositions. Museums wanted to display the meteorite. Private collectors offered staggering sums. A movie producer called about rights to his story. A book publisher wanted him to sign a contract on the spot. Even his cousin Jerry, whom he hadn't seen in 15 years, showed up asking for a loan based on Tom's newfound wealth. Tom turned them all away. Until he knew exactly what he had found, he wasn't making any deals. Late in the afternoon, as the excavation team prepared to expose the final section of the meteorite, Dr. Hayes called Tom over. Standing with her was an older man with thick glasses and a rumpled suit. Tom, this is Dr. Richard Chen from the National Science Foundation, she said. He's one of the world's leading experts in archaeoastronomy. The man shook Tom's hand firmly. Fascinating discovery, Mr. Wilson. Simply fascinating. Dr. Chen has a theory about the markings, Dr. Hayes explained. The older scientist nodded eagerly. I've been studying the photographs, and there's something remarkably familiar about these patterns. They appear to be astronomical in nature. Specifically, I believe they represent star positions. Star positions? Tom repeated. Yes, Dr. Chen continued, pulling out several printouts. Look here. This circular arrangement with these lines radiating outward. It bears a striking resemblance to how ancient cultures depicted star systems. But the precision is far beyond what any ancient civilization on Earth could have achieved with the tools available to them. Tom looked from the printouts to the meteorite partially, visible in the excavation pit. So you're saying? I'm saying this object might be a star map, Dr. Chen said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper despite there being no one else within earshot. And if I'm right about the stellar configurations it depicts, it's showing a view of the sky from a perspective that isn't Earth. A heavy silence fell between them. Tom looked up at the clear blue Nebraska sky, trying to wrap his mind around what he was hearing. There's more, Dr. Hayes said. The metallurgical analysis came back. The composition includes elements that are extremely rare on Earth, along with some alloys we can't identify at all. Whatever this object is, it doesn't match any known meteorite classification. Tom took a deep breath. Let me get this straight. You're telling me that this thing in my backyard might not be from our solar system, and it might have been made by someone else? Neither scientist contradicted him. We need to complete the excavation, Dr. Hayes said instead. There could be more information once we can see the entire object. The final phase of excavation proceeded with painstaking care. As the last section of the meteorite was revealed, a hush fell over the site. Even the crowd of spectators seemed to sense something momentous was happening. What emerged from the earth wasn't just more of the same. The bottom portion of the object featured a distinct section with different markings, not geometric patterns, but something that looked almost like writing. Symbols arranged in rows, uniform in size but varied in design. Dr. Chen's hands trembled as he photographed this new discovery. "This changes everything," he murmured. Word of the strange symbols spread quickly through the assembled scientists, creating a buzz of excitement. Experts in linguistics and ancient writing systems were hastily consulted via video calls. No one could identify the symbols as matching any known writing system, ancient or modern. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the farm, Tom stood at the edge of the excavation pit, staring at the fully revealed object. It no longer seemed like a visitor from space. It seemed like a message. That evening, government officials arrived. Men and women in dark suits who spoke quietly with Dr. Hayes and Dr. Chen. Tom watched from his porch as they examined the meteorite, took their own photographs and made phone calls. One of them, a tall woman with short gray hair, approached Tom. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Jennifer Boyd, Department of Science and Technology. I need to speak with you about the security implications of your discovery." Tom frowned. "Security implications? This is potentially a matter of national importance," she explained. "We need to establish proper protocols moving forward." "It's still on my land," Tom said firmly, "which means it's still my decision what happens to it." Boyd smiled thinly. "Of course, we're not here to take over, merely to assist. But you understand that if this object is what some of these scientists believe it might be, it could have significant implications for, well, everyone." As darkness fell, powerful lights were set up around the excavation site. The scientists worked in shifts now, documenting every inch of the object. The crowd of onlookers had thinned, but many remained, setting up tents along the road. News crews broadcast live updates. Social media exploded with theories and speculation. Tom couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch watching the flurry of activity in his field. Rex lay beside him, head on paws, equally unsettled. Dr. Hayes joined him sometime after midnight, looking exhausted. "Any new discoveries?" Tom asked. She shook her head. "Nothing concrete. The linguists are fascinated by the symbols, but no one can make sense of them yet." She paused. "The government people want to move the object to a secure facility." Tom stiffened. "And what do you think?" "I think it should stay right where it is until we understand it better," she said. "Moving it could damage it and we'd lose valuable context." Tom nodded, relieved. "That's what I think, too." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the scientists work under the bright lights. "You know," Dr. Hayes said eventually, "whatever this turns out to be, you've become part of something historic. Your name will be in textbooks." Tom chuckled. "Never thought fame would be so exhausting." As the night deepened, a strange calm settled over Tom. Whatever lay in his field, whether it was a simple meteorite with unusual markings, an artifact from some ancient Earth civilization, or something far more extraordinary, it had chosen his land. After generations of his family working this soil, planting and harvesting, living and dying on these acres, the earth had revealed its secret to him, and whatever happened next, Tom Wilson, Nebraska farmer and unlikely center of a scientific storm, would face it head on. Dawn broke over the farm with a soft pink glow. Tom had finally dozed off in his porch chair, a blanket draped over him courtesy of Dr. Hayes before she'd returned to the excavation site. He woke with a start, momentarily disoriented until the sight of the dozens of vehicles and tents in his fields brought reality crashing back. Rex nudged his hand, looking up with concerned eyes. Tom scratched the dog's ears. "Quite a mess we've stirred up, eh, boy?" His morning routine felt surreal, feeding the chickens and checking his crops while scientists huddled around computer screens and government officials spoke urgently into phones. The contrast between his ordinary farm life and the extraordinary situation unfolding was jarring. After a quick breakfast, Tom made his way to the excavation site. The meteorite, or whatever it was, had been completely uncovered now. In the morning light, it looked even more impressive. Nearly 15 feet in diameter, its dark metallic surface was covered with the geometric patterns and mysterious symbols that had caused such excitement. A team of researchers circled it, taking measurements and photographs from every angle. Dr. Chen spotted Tom and hurried over, his eyes bright with excitement despite his obvious exhaustion. "Mr. Wilson, we've made a breakthrough during the night. The symbols, we believe they might form some kind of mathematical sequence." Tom raised his eyebrows. "Math? You think it's, what, some kind of equation?" "Not exactly," Dr. Chen explained, leading Tom closer to the object. "Look here at this section." He pointed to a row of symbols that Tom couldn't begin to understand. "These repeated patterns show what appears to be a numerical system, but based on 6 rather than 10. Like counting in a different way?" Tom asked, trying to grasp what the scientist was saying. "Precisely. And here," Dr. Chen continued, moving to another section, "we see what might be astronomical coordinates. We're still deciphering them, but they appear to reference a specific region of space." Tom stared at the symbols, feeling both awed and overwhelmed. "So what does that mean? For where this thing came from?" Before Dr. Chen could answer, they were interrupted by Jennifer Boyd, the government representative who had spoken to Tom the previous evening. "Dr. Chen, we need you for the briefing," she said firmly, then turned to Tom. "Mr. Wilson, I'd like to speak with you privately." "If you have a moment," Tom nodded, following her away from the excavation site toward a cluster of official-looking vehicles. "Mr. Wilson," Boyd began once they were out of earshot, "I want to be transparent with you. This situation has escalated to the highest levels of government interest." "I figured as much," Tom replied. "We believe it would be in everyone's best interest, including yours, if we move the object to a secure facility where it can be studied properly. Away from all this." She gestured at the media circus and crowds of onlookers. Tom crossed his arms. "And what about what Dr. Hayes said about risking damage if it's moved?" Boyd smiled tightly. "We have experts in artifact transportation who can ensure its safety. Mr. Wilson, I need to emphasize the potential national security implications here. If this object is indeed what some are beginning to believe, a manufactured item of non-terrestrial origin, then controlling access to it becomes paramount." "It's still on my land," Tom reminded her. "Yes, and you would of course be compensated generously," Boyd said smoothly. "We're prepared to offer you a substantial sum for the rights to the object and exclusive access to the discovery site." Tom looked back at the meteorite, surrounded by scientists who were pointing excitedly at various markings. "How substantial?" Boyd named a figure that made Tom blink. It was enough to pay off his mortgage, modernize his entire farm, and still have plenty left over, more money than he'd ever imagined having. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Of course," Boyd replied, "but I should mention that if necessary, there are legal avenues the government could pursue to secure the object regardless. I'd much prefer we reach an amicable agreement." The implied threat wasn't lost on Tom. As Boyd walked away, he felt a surge of resentment. This was his land, his discovery, but he was just one farmer against the entire government. He made his way back to the house, needing space to clear his head. Inside, he found Dr. Hayes sitting at his kitchen table, reviewing data on her laptop. "Sorry for invading your space," she said, looking up. It was the only quiet place left. "It's fine," Tom sighed, dropping into a chair across from her. "Did you hear what they're offering for the meteorite?" Dr. Hayes closed her laptop. "I heard rumors. It's a lot of money, I imagine." "Life-changing money," Tom confirmed. "But they also hinted they could take it by force if necessary." Dr. Hayes frowned. "That doesn't surprise me. But before you make any decisions, there's something you should know." She leaned forward. "We detected energy readings from the object last night." Tom stared at her. "Energy like electricity?" "Not exactly. More like a very faint electromagnetic field. It's subtle, but it's there. And it appears to be changing." "Changing how?" "Patterns shifting slightly. Almost like what?" Tom pressed. Dr. Hayes hesitated. "Like it's reacting to our presence. To our testing." Tom felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying it's alive?" No, she quickly clarified. "Not alive in a biological sense, but possibly active in some way we don't yet understand. Which is why moving it could be not just damaging but potentially dangerous." Before Tom could respond, shouts from outside caught their attention. They rushed to the porch to see a commotion at the excavation site. People were backing away from the meteorite, pointing and talking excitedly. Tom and Dr. Hayes hurried across the field. As they approached, Tom saw what had caused the excitement. A section of the meteorite's surface was glowing with a soft blue light. "What's happening?" Tom asked as they reached the edge of the excavation pit. Dr. Chen looked up, his face a mixture of awe and apprehension. "It started a few minutes ago. The symbols in this section began to illuminate. After what?" Dr. Hayes asked urgently. "What were you doing when it started?" One of the graduate students spoke up. "We were using the new scanning equipment to map the interior structure. The deep penetrating radar." The blue glow was spreading slowly, symbol by symbol, like someone turning on lights in sequence. The crowd of onlookers had noticed too, and a wave of murmurs rippled through them. Government officials converged on the site, speaking urgently into radios and phones. Jennifer Boyd pushed her way forward, her face tense. "Everyone back," she ordered. "Security perimeter now." But no one moved. They were all transfixed by the spreading glow, which had now illuminated nearly a quarter of the meteorite's symbols. The light pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. "Is it dangerous?" Tom asked, looking from Dr. Hayes to Dr. Chen. "We don't detect any radiation or harmful emissions," one of the scientists replied, checking a handheld device. "The energy output is minimal." The blue light continued to spread until all the symbols were illuminated. Then, to everyone's astonishment, they began to shift. The patterns rearranged themselves, flowing across the surface like water. "It's reconfiguring," Dr. Chen whispered in awe. "The entire symbolic structure is changing." For several minutes, they all watched in stunned silence as the glowing blue symbols moved and reshaped. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the movement stopped. The symbols had formed an entirely new pattern. Dr. Chen leaned forward, studying the new configuration. It's simpler now. More uniform." He pointed to a section. "These repeated elements, they almost look like what?" Boyd demanded. "Like a response," Dr. Chen said softly. "Like it's trying to communicate." A hush fell over the crowd. The implications of what he was suggesting were enormous. If the object was actively responding to them, it wasn't just an artifact. It was something far more significant. In the tense silence, Tom's phone rang. He answered it absently, still staring at the glowing meteorite. "Mr. Wilson?" came a voice he didn't recognize. "This is Dr. Alan Takahashi from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We've been monitoring your situation and, well, there's something else you should know." Tom listened, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When the call ended, he looked up to find Dr. Hayes watching him. "What is it?" she asked. Tom took a deep breath. "That was NASA. They've detected something entering Earth's atmosphere. Something big, and it's on a direct course for here." The news spread quickly. Government officials huddled together, speaking urgently. Scientists rushed to verify NASA's findings. Media crews broadcast live updates. The crowd of onlookers, sensing something momentous was happening, pressed forward against the barriers. As darkness fell once again over Tom Wilson's farm, the glowing blue symbols cast an eerie light across the faces of everyone gathered around the excavation site. Above them, somewhere in the night sky, something was coming. And deep inside, Tom knew his life, perhaps everyone's lives, was about to change forever. The night sky above Tom's farm had never seemed so vast and mysterious. Powerful telescopes had been hastily set up in the east field, pointed toward the coordinates NASA had provided. Scientists huddled around monitors while military personnel established a wider security perimeter. Pushing back the crowds and media, Tom stood next to Dr. Hayes, watching the frenetic activity with a strange sense of calm. Whatever was coming, whatever was about to happen, felt somehow inevitable, as if his whole life had been leading to this moment. "They're saying it will be visible to the naked eye within the hour," Dr. Hayes said, checking her phone. "NASA's tracking suggests it's slowing as it approaches." "Slowing?" Tom asked. "Can meteors do that?" "No," Dr. Hayes said quietly. "They can't." Jennifer Boyd approached them, flanked by two serious-looking men in military uniforms. "Mr. Wilson, we're establishing an emergency response protocol. For your own safety, we recommend you relocate to a secure facility until we understand what we're dealing with." Tom shook his head. "This is my land. I'm staying." Boyd looked like she wanted to argue, but instead turned to Dr. Hayes. "The object in the atmosphere, any theories?" "Several," Dr. Hayes replied. "None of them conventional. The way it's decelerating suggests controlled entry. And the timing? Right after the meteorite activated." She left the implication hanging. Boyd nodded grimly. That's what our experts think too. We're treating this as a first contact scenario. The words hung in the air between them. First contact. After days of hints and theories, someone had finally said it aloud. Tom looked back at the meteorite, still glowing with blue symbols. So what is that thing? Some kind of beacon? That's our leading theory, Boyd admitted. It may have been dormant until our scanning equipment triggered it. Now it's active and potentially signaling to whatever is approaching. A young scientist ran up to them, breathless with excitement. It's visible. You can see it with the telescopes now. They hurried to the observation area where several large telescopes had been set up. A crowd of scientists and officials jostled for position. One of the telescopes had been connected to a large monitor so multiple people could view the image. On the screen, a bright point of light was visible against the black backdrop of space. Unlike a meteor, it wasn't streaking or burning. It moved with purpose, growing gradually larger. Trajectory calculations confirm it's heading directly for us, someone announced. Current speed suggests arrival in approximately 40 minutes. Government officials spoke urgently into phones and radios. Military personnel checked weapons with nervous hands. Scientists rushed between instruments, gathering every bit of data they could. Tom stepped back from the crowd, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. He walked to the edge of his property, to the old oak tree where his father had built a swing decades ago. Rex followed faithfully at his heels. Sitting on the worn wooden swing, Tom gazed up at the night sky. Somewhere up there something was coming, something that might have sent the object in his field, something not from Earth. Quite a mess we've got ourselves into, Rex, he murmured, scratching behind the dog's ears. Mind if I join you? It was Dr. Hayes approaching from behind. Tom gestured to the ground beside the swing. Free country. For now, anyway. She sat, leaning back against the oak tree. It's peaceful here, away from all that. She nodded toward the chaos around the excavation site. Used to be peaceful everywhere on this farm, Tom said without bitterness. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. What do you think is going to happen? Tom finally asked. Dr. Hayes sighed. Honestly, I have no idea. We're in uncharted territory, but I keep thinking about those symbols on the meteorite. They don't feel threatening. They feel instructional, like they're trying to tell us something important. The quiet moment was interrupted by Dr. Chen, who came running toward them. You need to come see this, he said urgently. The meteorite, it's changing again. They rushed back to the excavation site. The glowing blue symbols had indeed changed, forming new patterns that pulsed with increasing brightness. The energy readings are climbing, one of the scientists announced, monitoring a device. It's like it's powering up for something. Above them, a murmur went through the crowd as someone pointed upward. A bright light was now visible in the night sky without telescopes, a steady, bluish-white glow that grew gradually larger. 15 minutes to arrival. Based on current velocity, someone called out. Jennifer Boyd approached Tom. Last chance, Mr. Wilson. We need to move you to safety. Tom shook his head. It came to my farm for a reason. I'm seeing this through. The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Military helicopters arrived, hovering at a distance. More government officials appeared. The crowd of onlookers, despite being pushed back nearly a mile, had grown as word spread. The approaching object grew brighter in the sky, now clearly visible as more than just a point of light. Through the telescopes, it appeared to be roughly cylindrical, with a smooth metallic surface that reflected the sunlight from the other side of the Earth. As it descended into the lower atmosphere, the meteorite's glow intensified dramatically. The symbols pulsed faster, almost like a countdown. Energy readings are off the charts, called out one of the scientists monitoring the instruments, but still no radiation or anything harmful. It's just energy, pure energy. Tom stood at the edge of the excavation pit, watching the meteorite pulse with blue light. Dr. Hayes and Dr. Chen stood beside him, their faces illuminated by the glow. Look, Dr. Chen said suddenly, pointing at a section of symbols. Those weren't there before. New symbols had appeared, flowing across the surface like liquid light. They formed a ring around the center of the meteorite, pulsing in sequence. It's a timer, Dr. Chen whispered. I think it's counting down to arrival. The light in the sky was now as bright as the moon, casting shadows across the farm. It had slowed dramatically and was descending in a controlled vertical path directly toward them. Military personnel raised weapons nervously. Government officials barked orders. Scientists aimed every instrument they had upward. 1 minute to contact, someone called out. Tom took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm amidst the chaos. Whatever was coming, it had chosen his land. He would meet it with dignity. The approaching object was now clearly visible, a sleek metallic cylinder about 60 feet long with no visible windows or openings. It descended silently without any signs of propulsion, trailing a soft blue glow similar to the meteorites. 30 seconds, the meteorite's pulse quickened, the blue glow now almost blinding. The symbols flowed faster across its surface, everyone back. Boyd ordered, but few people moved. They were all transfixed by what they were witnessing. 10 seconds. The cylinder slowed as it approached, coming to hover about 50 feet above the excavation pit. The air hummed with energy. Hair stood up on arms and necks. The farm was bathed in blue light, and then suddenly both the meteorite and the cylinder pulsed in perfect unison. A beam of light connected them, so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. When they could see again, the meteorite was changing. Its solid form seemed to be dissolving, restructuring, the metal flowing like liquid. The symbols remained, floating in the air even as the physical structure beneath them transformed. Slowly, incredibly, the meteorite began to rise from the pit. It hovered in the air, still connected to the cylinder by the beam of light. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it began to unfold like a flower opening its petals. The solid metal split and reshaped itself, revealing a complex interior structure. At the center was a small, crystalline object that glowed with its own inner light. "It's a container," Dr. Chen whispered in awe. The meteorite was just a shell, a protective casing. The crystal rose slowly through the air, following the beam of light toward the cylinder. As it reached the larger object, a seam appeared in the cylinder's smooth surface, opening to receive the crystal. Once the crystal was inside, the cylinder sealed itself again. The meteorite, now transformed into an intricate flower-like structure, remained hovering over the pit. For several long moments, nothing happened. Everyone held their breath, watching the cylinder float silently above them. Then, without warning, the flower-like structure began to emit a soft, golden light. The light spread outward in a gentle wave, washing over everyone present. It felt warm, almost comforting. And as the light touched each person, something extraordinary happened. Knowledge flowed into their minds, not as words or images, but as pure understanding. The purpose of the meteorite, the origin of the cylinder, the meaning of the symbols, it all became clear in an instant. The meteorite had been a seed, sent to Earth thousands of years ago. It contained knowledge from a civilization among the stars, scientific knowledge, cultural understanding, philosophical insights. Not a demand or a threat, but a gift, an invitation to join a broader community of intelligent life. The crystal was the key, the cipher that allowed the knowledge to be accessed. And now that it had been recovered, the invitation was open. As the golden light faded, Tom found himself looking up at the cylinder with new understanding. It wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Jennifer Boyd approached him, her face transformed by wonder. "Mr. Wilson," she said softly, "it seems your farm just became the most important location in human history." Tom nodded, still processing the vastness of what he now understood. "Funny how life works out," he said simply. "1 minute you're worrying about rain washing away your topsoil, the next you're hosting visitors from another world." Dr. Hayes laughed, the sound bright with relief and joy. Tom Wilson, man of understatement. The cylinder began to ascend slowly into the night sky, its mission completed. But the transformed meteorite remained hovering above the pit, a permanent connection to whatever had sent it. As dawn broke over Tom's farm once more, the world was forever changed. News of what had happened spread across the globe. People looked to the stars with new eyes, knowing now that they were not alone. And Tom Wilson, ordinary farmer from Nebraska, who had stumbled upon an extraordinary discovery in his backyard, found himself at the center of humanity's greatest adventure, the first steps into a larger universe.